what kind of initiative need to be taken by organizations with mature strategic portfolio management practice to stay competitive in volatile political and economic situations?
Yes. So the political and economic situations that we find ourselves. So again, this question resounds with me. I've lived most of my adult life overseas, in some of the most austere locations around the world, and every country is different. Every place has its own political system, culture, economies. We're all interacting with the folks around us. And one thing I found is the different projects, programs, and portfolios that I found myself under had to, well, and again, coming from a contracting perspective, I saw, well, one of my first contracts did not incorporate the labor laws of Kuwait into the projections and the budgets. They have what they call a remittance, where they you pay employees so much over the years, and that wasn't budgeted in, and that was a very painful payout that had to happen because of the law, that wasn't originally plugged into that contract. And so there's a lesson learned right there. And as, of course, I took that lesson learned. So after that, I was on a number of proposals and that we were bidding on. I always made sure that, hey, what's the labor law for that country? And every country is slightly different. The Middle East tends to be fairly similar, but there can be nuances between them. Again, depends on where you're at. When I was in Singapore, again, different labor laws, different rules on who could be there. And especially in our world, we have, we move labor around the world. Dharam, you're Indian. There's Indians all over the world. There's Filipinos all over the world. There's Bangladeshis and Malaysians, Americans. This globalization has moved citizens to being expats in a lot of different locations. And as an expat in a different country, you have different rules and laws that often apply to you until you get a residency or a citizenship and things like that. So these are the kinds of things that you have to work about in your portfolio management. And going back to that human resources, a lot of times, at least my contracts, I always had different nationalities from different countries, and each one I had to kind of handle differently depending on what that situation was. So that's where I see a lot of that political and economic piece come in. And also, economics is different. The economics of, again, I use your example of India, is distinctly different than Australia and America and Bahrain. The pay is different, right? When I was in Afghanistan, I had a lot of Indian employees. Well, they, for an American rate, it was more than what they were getting in India. And so that's why they were retained there, because they were making more. But all these kind of different economic levels kind of play because people are always going to be self-interested. They're going to go where it's best. But you can also acquire great talent, and where they're in a much better position than they were financially. But for you, it might be, and I use Indians, for example. I could pay a great talent, and he's actually building a great home and situation for his family back in India. But I get great talent, but I can also be more competitive, because we're always dealing with this, the pricing competitiveness. That's always a challenge wherever you're at. And so you can find win-win situations, but you kind of have to work between those political pressures and economic pressures.